Genesis 46 is a pivotal chapter in the Bible that describes Jacob's journey to Egypt to reunite with his son Joseph. Here is an overview of the key events in this chapter. Before we start, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy our video, please hit the like button. This will help us reach more people and create content for you. Now let's get started with today's video. Genesis 46, Jacob's journey to Egypt. 1. Introduction. Genesis 46 is one of the most significant chapters in the story of Israel. It marks the transition from the patriarchal period, where the covenant promises were made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, into the time when the descendants of Jacob, now called Israel, would settle in Egypt. The events of this chapter show the deep interplay of God's promises, human emotions, and the unfolding of God's plan for the nation of Israel. Jacob, also called Israel, and his family are on the verge of a major life-altering journey. The last time Jacob thought of Joseph, his beloved son, was when he was told Joseph had been killed. But now, in a surprising turn of events, Jacob discovers that Joseph is alive and serving as a ruler in Egypt. His heart, heavy with the weight of years of grief, is suddenly filled with joy and anticipation. This chapter records Jacob's departure from Canaan to reunite with Joseph in Egypt, a momentous event in the unfolding of biblical history. 2. Jacob's sacrifice and God's assurance. Genesis 46 verses 1-4. Before setting off on this major journey, Jacob does something very significant. He offers sacrifices to God. He stops at Beersheba, the southernmost point of the Promised Land, a place that holds deep spiritual meaning for his family. Beersheba had been a site of worship for both Abraham and Isaac, Jacob's father and grandfather. This act of sacrifice shows Jacob's reliance on God for guidance and protection in this life-altering journey. God speaks to Jacob in a vision at night, reassuring him. He tells Jacob not to be afraid to go down to Egypt, because God's plan for him and his descendants involves their stay in Egypt. God promises to make Jacob into a great nation there. This echoes the promises given earlier to Abraham, Genesis 12 verse 2, Isaac, Genesis 26 verse 24, and Jacob himself, Genesis 28 verse 14. God's reassurance is key here. Even though Egypt is a foreign land, it is part of the divine plan. This interaction is rich with meaning. God's assurance that Jacob will not only go to Egypt but also return, "I will surely bring you up again," is prophetic. This does not refer to Jacob personally coming back, as he would die in Egypt, but rather to his descendants eventually returning to Canaan. This prefigures the Exodus, when the Israelites, who will become enslaved in Egypt, are eventually led out by Moses. Also, God tells Jacob that Joseph will be with him at his death. This intimate detail is meant to comfort Jacob. It is a promise that his reunion with Joseph will not be temporary, and Joseph will be at his side when his life ends, closing a chapter of long separation and heartache. 3. The departure to Egypt, Genesis 46 verses 5-7. With God's reassurance, Jacob proceeds with his journey. He is joined by all his descendants, sons, daughters, grandchildren, and servants, who accompany him to Egypt. This is not just a family visit. It is a migration of an entire clan. Jacob's family, which now constitutes the beginning of the Israelite nation, is moving from Canaan, the land promised to them by God, into Egypt, a land that will serve as their home for several generations. The symbolism of this move is profound. Canaan represents the land of promise, while Egypt, at this point, is a place of provision. The journey to Egypt represents a time of transition, where God's people leave their homeland to grow and flourish in a foreign land, setting the stage for their later enslavement and eventual redemption. It is also important to note that the move to Egypt is necessitated by a famine in Canaan. Egypt, under Joseph's wise administration, has become a place of refuge and survival for many people during this time of severe famine. 4. The genealogy of Jacob's family, Genesis 46 verses 8-27. These verses detail the descendants of Jacob who made the journey to Egypt, totaling 70 people. This number, symbolic of completeness in the Bible, emphasizes the foundational nature of Jacob's family in the formation of Israel. This genealogical record is more than just a list of names. It serves to document the family that would grow into the 12 tribes of Israel. The number 70 has a symbolic significance in biblical numerology. 70 represents totality and completion. In a sense, this genealogy is underscoring that Jacob's family, though small in comparison to the great nations around them, is a complete unit chosen by God to fulfill his covenant promises. The structure of the genealogy shows the family divided according to the four mothers of Jacob's children: Leah, Zilpah, Rachel, and Bilhah. This reflects the patriarchal tradition and the importance of lineage in biblical culture. Each of Jacob's sons is listed with their children, underscoring the growth of Jacob's family since his own birth in Genesis 25. One particular emphasis is on the children of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh, born to him in Egypt. These two sons will later play a significant role in the formation of the tribes of Israel, as they each will become the heads of two half-tribes. This inclusion of Joseph's children in the list of Jacob's descendants highlights that even in a foreign land, Joseph's place in the family is assured. 5. The emotional reunion of Jacob and Joseph, Genesis 46 verses 28 to 30. This section records one of the most touching moments in the book of Genesis. Jacob sends Judah ahead of the group to inform Joseph that they are approaching. Judah's leadership role here foreshadows his future importance as the ancestor of the tribe from which King David and, ultimately, Jesus, will descend. Joseph travels in his royal chariot to meet his father in Goshen. Upon seeing his father after so many years, Joseph falls upon Jacob's neck and weeps for a long time. This is the culmination of years of separation, heartache, and uncertainty. Joseph's love for his father is clearly evident in this emotional display. Jacob's response is deeply poignant. He declares that now he can die in peace, having seen that his son Joseph is alive. Jacob's words echo similar sentiments in Scripture, such as Simeon's declaration in the New Testament, Luke 2 verses 29 to 30, after seeing the infant Jesus. For Jacob, the sight of Joseph alive is the fulfillment of long-held hopes. This moment is not just a family reunion, but also a moment of spiritual significance. Jacob can now rest in peace, knowing that his beloved son is not only alive but is thriving. 6. Joseph's plan for his family, Genesis 46 verses 31 to 34. In the final verses of the chapter, Joseph outlines a plan for how his family will present themselves to Pharaoh. He instructs them to emphasize their occupation as shepherds and cattle herders. Joseph's goal is to ensure that his family is allowed to settle in Goshen, a fertile area suitable for their livestock. Joseph is aware of the cultural differences between the Egyptians and the Israelites. Egyptians considered shepherds to be an abomination, verse 34, and Joseph uses this cultural prejudice to his advantage. By making sure that Pharaoh knows the family are shepherds, Joseph secures their isolation in Goshen, which will protect them from assimilation into Egyptian society. This separation is important for maintaining the distinct identity of the Israelites, who will eventually grow into a large nation while in Egypt. This plan also shows Joseph's wisdom and his ability to navigate the complexities of Egyptian court politics. He ensures that his family will have what they need to survive and prosper, while also keeping them in a place that will allow them to retain their cultural and religious identity. Goshen becomes a place of refuge and growth for the family, setting the stage for their eventual rise in numbers and power. Conclusion. Genesis 46 is a rich chapter full of meaning, marking the transition of Jacob's family from a small tribal clan into a nascent nation. The move to Egypt, while necessary for survival, will eventually lead to the Israelites' enslavement, but this too is part of God's larger plan for their growth and eventual redemption. Throughout the chapter, the themes of God's faithfulness, human emotion, and divine providence are intertwined, showing how even in times of great change and uncertainty, God's promises remain sure. Jacob's journey to Egypt is more than just a family reunion. It is the next step in the unfolding of God's covenant promises, promises that would eventually lead to the birth of the nation of Israel and ultimately to the coming of the Messiah. Please subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.